Savannah Carrington sat in the cold conference room at Crestmont Dynamics, her heart pounding as Brandon Tate read from a sheet of paper like it was any ordinary Tuesday. He never looked up, never acknowledged the weight of what he was saying. Due to departmental restructuring, today will be your final day with Crestmont. That was it. No thank you, no ceremony, not even a handshake. Isla 61 had given the company nearly 3 decades, 29 years and 9 months to be exact. She had walked through those glass doors before dawn for years, climbing ladders, repairing burst pipes, maintaining the heating system through brutal winters. She had trained every maintenance tech that passed through the department, knew every corner of all 5 Crestmont buildings better than the architects who designed them. And now she was being dismissed 3 days before qualifying for her full pension and healthcare benefits. 3 days. She stared at the man who now wielded her future like a budget line, his eyes still fixed on his screen fingers, tapping as if preparing for his next meeting. Around them, the hum of fluorescent lights buzzed steadily, while the cubicles beyond the glass walls churned with movement. People Isla had mentored walked through onboarding, even covered for during emergencies. None of them looked up. She was invisible now. "Badge and keys, please," Brandon said, finally reaching out his hand. Isla unclipped the ID from her belt. The plastic had worn smooth from daily swipes through security doors. Her fingers lingered a second longer on the master keys, access to every floor, every electrical room, every boiler closet. Trust that took decades to earn. She placed them in his palm without a word, signed the paperwork, and walked out past the people who owed their training, their start to her. Her truck started on the first try. She sat behind the wheel and stared back at the building, a place she had once believed would honor its promises. Something felt wrong, calculated. She had been let go like she was nothing. But deep down, something in her shifted. Not rage, not despair, just the beginning of a quiet, focused resolve. Isla Carrington had always believed in showing up early, prepared, and without complaint. That belief carried her through 29 years and 9 months at Crestmont Dynamics, starting as a facilities assistant when her life was crumbling. She had just finalized her divorce, lost her home, and was trying to keep custody of her 8-year-old daughter. The job came with health insurance and a promise: stay loyal, and we will take care of you. She clung to that promise through long winters spent fixing broken radiators and storm-damaged roofs, through decades of answering late-night calls about server room outages and burst pipes. Isla became the person people counted on, the invisible force that kept the company running. She missed birthdays, holidays, even her daughter's college orientation, because the building needed her. Crestmont was not just her job. It was her purpose, her identity. When her husband passed from liver cancer 15 years in, it was Crestmont's insurance that covered the treatments. Back then, the company sent flowers. Back then, they showed up at the funeral. But that Crestmont no longer existed. The shift came slowly first, as whispers about modernization, then as memos full of buzzwords like lean transformation and operational streamlining. Brandon Tate's arrival had been the final nail. Young, clean-cut, all spreadsheets and performance matrices, he walked through the halls like he owned every brick. Isla felt her world shrink as meetings moved forward without her. Her input was no longer requested. And a new tech shadowed her steps, asking oddly specific questions about her daily duties. She told herself it was nothing, just transition noise. She was 3 days from retirement, and all she had to do was hold on. But now, sitting at her kitchen table, with a termination letter in one hand and her well-worn pay stubs in the other, she felt the full weight of betrayal. Crestmont had not let her go because she was no longer useful. They had cut her loose because she was too close to collecting what she had earned. If you have ever felt used, discarded, or replaced after years of dedication, comment the word "yes" below. And subscribe to this channel, because Isla's story is just beginning, and it is one you will not want to miss. They took her job, but not her voice. And Isla was just warming up. The coffee in Isla's mug had long gone cold by the time she realized what was wrong. The numbers in her termination paperwork did not match her own records, not even close. It claimed she had 29 years and 8 months of service, but Isla knew her start date by heart January 3rd, 1995. The day she stepped into Crestmont Dynamics, wearing her only pair of clean slacks, ready to rebuild her life after a divorce that had left her with nothing but a child to feed and a secondhand toolbox. Every promotion she turned down, every birthday she missed, every holiday she spent alone in the boiler room, fixing frozen pipes, it had all been in service of this promise 30 years of loyalty for a secure future. Now they were saying she fell short by 4 weeks. It did not make sense. Her last performance review had been glowing. Her attendance record was spotless. Why cut her loose with only days left before her benefits fully vested? She pulled out her old employee handbooks, the one from 2009, still bearing the coffee stain from her daughter's high school graduation day. There it was in plain language: employees who complete 30 years of continuous service will qualify for full pension and lifetime health benefits. No room for interpretation. And then she remembered the memo, Brandon Tate's all-staff update from the previous quarter. A vague but confident promise that Crestmont remained committed to honoring all legacy agreements regarding retirement eligibility. She had even printed it and tucked it into her filing cabinet. Isla laid out her pay stubs from the last 15 years, every holiday shift, every overtime hour, every sick day she never took. The pattern was clear. They had miscalculated, or rather, they hoped she would not notice. She was not a fool. This was not a clerical error. It was calculated, cold, quiet, designed to push her out just before the finish line. And then a voice surfaced in her memory: Janice O'Connell, the no-nonsense former HR lead who had retired just last year. "Keep your paperwork, Isla," she used to say, "because someday you may need to prove you were right." That someday had come. Isla pulled out her phone and stared at Janice's number for a long time. Calling would mean facing it, admitting they had betrayed her. But staying silent, that was no longer an option. Janice O'Connell did not sound surprised when Isla called. "I was wondering when you'd ring," she said calmly, as if she had been waiting. Isla laid it all out: her termination, the pension discrepancy, Brandon Tate's cold dismissal, just days before her eligibility kicked in. Janice listened closely, asking precise questions about dates, documents, and emails. "Do you still have your original offer letter?" she asked. Every piece, Isla replied. "My late husband used to say, 'Never throw away proof of your value.'" That answer changed everything. Janice's voice sharpened. "Then listen carefully. What Brandon did is not just unethical, it may be illegal." Over the next few days, Isla gathered everything. She filled 3 boxes pay stubs going back 20 years, performance reviews, internal memos, old HR policy manuals, every email she had ever printed that mentioned retirement. She even had a sticky note from a former manager, thanking her for covering every shift during a power outage in 2012. Janice reviewed every document with the same precision she had been known for in her Crestmont years. When she reached the updated memo Brandon sent out, the one promising all retirement benefit calculations would honor legacy agreements, she paused and read it twice. "This is gold," she whispered. "He put it in writing. Then he turned around and fired you with a falsified service record. That is not a mistake, Isla. That is a setup." Janice had already been working with the Department of Labor as a private consultant. She placed a call to the investigator she knew would take this seriously. Within 48 hours, Isla's case was officially under federal review. What began as a personal betrayal had now turned into something far larger. Janice explained the stakes clearly. If we prove intent, it moves from civil liability to criminal fraud, wire fraud to be exact. And if Brandon used email to execute this plan, that is a federal offense. Isla's hands trembled as she repacked the documents, but not from fear. From clarity. They had not just underestimated her, they had underestimated the quiet power of a woman who had built her entire life on grit, precision, and unbreakable memory. What Brandon thought was a clean cut would soon become a federal investigation, and Isla would not be standing alone. The call came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Isla had just returned from Janice's office when her phone lit up with Brandon Tate's name. She let it ring twice before answering. His voice was clipped falsely casual. I hear you've been talking to people. I hope you're not planning to do anything impulsive. Isla said nothing. The silence unsettled him. Look, I get it. You're upset. But we followed protocol. Your service record shows 29 years and 8 months. Everything checks out on our end. Isla could hear him trying to bait her into an argument, trying to control the conversation. But she had learned the value of silence. Letting a man talk long enough, she'd found often revealed more than direct questions. Of course, he continued, if someone were to pursue a baseless claim against the company, we'd be forced to look deeper into their record. Every incident, every questionable moment, even private comments that might reflect poorly on the company's brand. The threat hung heavy in the air, retaliation cloaked in corporate jargon. Isla simply replied, understood, and hung up. But Brandon had no idea the complaint had already been filed. Janice had submitted the full evidence package that morning. What came next moved faster than anyone expected. Federal investigators had already been monitoring Crestmont dynamics based on prior tips. Isla's documentation was the missing piece. Within days, agents began collecting data, pulling email logs, personnel files, and employee performance records. The findings were worse than Janice feared. Over the last 2 years, 4 other senior employees, each within months of retirement eligibility, had been let go under similar pretenses. All had service dates that had been subtly altered in internal systems. The smoking gun, an email thread between Brandon and Patricia Walsh, Crestmont's current HR director, discussing strategies to optimize pension obligations and proactively reallocate legacy costs. Isla's name was mentioned 6 times in just 3 months, the term used to describe her high-cost phase-out. That night, Isla sat alone in her living room, rereading the emails the investigators had shared. Anger flared, but beneath it, something steadier was growing. Validation. She had not imagined the betrayal. It was calculated, coordinated, and now exposed. Brandon had tried to intimidate her. He had miscalculated. This was not just a case. This was a reckoning. ChatGPT Janoi. It was barely sunrise when Isla Carrington stood outside the downtown Department of Labor building, clutching a folder full of memories and proof. Inside, 2 federal investigators, both no older than her daughter, welcomed her into a glass-walled conference room and pressed the record button. They asked her to recount everything year by year, responsibility by responsibility. She spoke with precision, every detail recalled like a blueprint etched in her bones. Then they slid a series of printed emails across the table. Isla's breath caught. The messages were far worse than she expected. Not only had Brandon Tate and HR Director Patricia Walsh discussed terminating her, they had been tracking multiple employees nearing retirement, labeling them as liabilities and Q4 optimization targets. There was even a PowerPoint presentation given to Crestmont's board, one slide bluntly titled Legacy Employee Transition Strategy. Isla's name was on it, right beneath 3 others, who had also been terminated before their pensions could vest. The language was clinical, stripped of all humanity. Her decades of loyalty, her long nights spent under fluorescent lights, fixing server room breakdowns, were reduced to a budget line marked avoidable cost. One of the investigators looked up. Mrs. Carrington, based on this documentation, we believe Crestmont Dynamics deliberately and systematically defrauded employees of their earned retirement benefits. Your case is the strongest example. The room fell silent. For a moment, Isla thought of Brandon sitting smugly behind his laptop that day, dismissing her like an expired warranty. She thought of the keys she had surrendered the badge, worn smooth with time, the decades she gave without complaint. We are going to need you to testify, the second investigator said. This is going to federal court. There will be criminal charges. Isla nodded slowly. Not out of fear, but because something had shifted inside her the moment she realized she was not just a victim. She was the key witness in a case that would hold liars accountable and restore what had been stolen. What Brandon had dismissed as just business was about to become very personal. And Isla, after a lifetime of fixing broken things, was finally going to help fix something far bigger than a pipe or a server. She was going to fix a system. 3 months later, Isla stood in her garage, the scent of sawdust lingering in the air, as she carefully sanded the final edge of the oak bookshelf she had promised her granddaughter. The tools in her hand felt right familiar, in a way that nothing else had in weeks. Her pension checks had begun arriving exactly as they should have months ago, and the $200,000 settlement sat untouched in her savings account, quietly accumulating interest. Brandon Tate had pled guilty to wire fraud and conspiracy, now serving an 18-month sentence in federal prison. Patricia Walsh received 6 months and probation. Crestmont Dynamics had been acquired by a larger firm that immediately replaced the executive board and issued a formal apology to the affected employees. Reporters had called local news, had asked for interviews, and one business podcast even offered her a guest segment on workplace justice. Isla declined them all. She was not interested in fame or praise. All she ever wanted was to be treated fairly, to retire with the dignity she earned. Her daughter had called that morning voice warm and proud, "Mom, you didn't just stand up for yourself. You stood up for everyone who's ever been thrown aside." Isla smiled at that. She finished assembling the bookshelf and loaded it into her truck, knowing it would last for generations. As she drove, she thought about the difference between fixing something broken and building something new. One repairs damage, the other creates legacy. She had spent most of her life fixing things, but now, in this new chapter, she was finally building. And if you have ever been overlooked, undervalued, or told you were too late, too old, or too small to matter, this story is for you. Subscribe for more stories like Isla's. Her fight was quiet, but it changed everything. 2.